Hello guys, welcome to Ask Raglan. Today we're going to see little about the sinking city, which is Venice. So the city which is underwater for literally for several centuries. So how does it all began? So I'm not going to go into the detailed history of Venice. That's actually a really interesting part of it. But I'm just going to run through a couple of little interesting points which I want to share with you guys. So first thing is little history about Venice. So Venice, how does it all started? Why did people have to build buildings and city, pretty much the entire city on water? So if you know that 75% of the Venice is still underwater. Not underwater, it's built on top of water. So what is the purpose? What drove people to do that? So Venice was initially in the 5th century. It was just in the location, if you look at it, there was just few little tribes. They were basically fishermen and saltwater workers. So these are the two people generally occupied that particular lagoon area. And the Roman Empire, when it was actually facing a lot of threat from barbarians during around 4th, 5th century. Barbarians are actually a group of tribes. They are not actually one particular from a particular region or anything like that. They are Huns, Saxons, a lot of these different tribes. And these tribes, they work sort of in a similar fashion. Pretty much what people considered during those days as barbarians as anyone who lacked knowledge of Greek and Roman civilization knowledge or able to speak those languages. So they considered them as barbarians. They are all different tribes to put together. So these tribes, what they do is they put a lot of pressure on the Roman border for a really long time. So the Roman army was trying to defend them, trying to keep them away. They were actually having a lot of wars in between them as well. So the barbarians, pretty much, they work like guerrillas. So it's too hard for them to track them and eliminate them for even for a bigger army like Rome. And at last, during 5th century, when Roman Empire fell down for a lot of different conflicts, the barbarians tend to take that as an advantage onto their side, and they started putting a lot of pressure onto the Romans. So then bunch of Romans who tend to flee away from the incoming conflicts, they moved on to a quiet place inside the lagoon. They started moving towards the lagoon and start building cities on top of it. So that was happening for literally a lot of centuries. So now if you look at the lagoon, how do they able to build city on top of salt water? It's pretty much a portion of the sea. So if you look at Venice, it's actually not just one city there. It's actually 150 little islands put together to make up the city. And how do they build buildings on top of it? They drive pines, the pine trees, they drive it as piles under the water until they reach a strong bottom. And then they put lots and lots of wood plates on top of it. So the advantage of pine trees is, so when it actually comes in contact with water, it actually gets really hard. As the time goes, it becomes really hard and petrified. So that is an advantage of pine. So they used it for their work. So they put it as a pile under the water, and then they put wooden plates on top of it, and then they build the foundation on top of that. So that makes this particular foundation for Venice really strong. So the engineering behind it is really good. So next thing is, so how do these Venice is surviving after all these times? So why they have not built roads and things like that? There are some portions of Venice, like 25% of it has roads and access like every other city. 75% of still between water. So now these waters, what do they are, and what is the plan, and what is happening with the future of Venice when it's still underwater? So there is actually a risk. The Venice is still a sinking city. The reason being is rising water tides and raising water levels due to climate change is actually threatening Venice's existence altogether. By the year 2100, I think 2100, that's a year, probably around 80 years from now, Venice might be underwater if climate change was not taken seriously. So that was the really sickest news, because the Venice is a really beautiful city. Still, for a lot of people, it's one of the highest and most admired tourist destination. And if that city is going to be underwater, a lot of people are going to miss that. So now when this entire city is actually connected between waters and lagoons and stuff, how do the drainage system works? It's exactly like how Thames in England work. You know what happened during those Middle Ages? people just drain off all the drainage water, sewer water into the river. That's exactly what people do in Venice as well. So the drainage just directly connected to the lagoons. So the water that you see in Venice is not a clean water, it's a drainage water. Anyway, getting back to the topic. So we're going to do few more little things here, few more little videos about little interesting histories about Venice. So we'll start with some of their little background with barbarians, conflict with barbarians, and the political structure, how it changed, and World War also affect Venice to an extent, and how did that all came into play. And then we will look into what's the current situation, and how do the actually current city municipality actually maintains the city. So we will see that in future videos. Thanks for watching, guys.